with that. So I've pulled up lyrics from a Newsboys song from like the early aughts or late 90s. This was a song that I really liked, and I just heard it on the radio, well, on the digital streaming platform recently, and I like it, and so I wanted to use it. It's really simple, and so the lyrics here are, "You give me joy that is unspeakable, and I like it. Your love for me is irresistible. I can't fight it." And so what we have here is a very simple, a very clear and easy to understand set of statements. And so there are four statements. The first two clusters related and the second two clusters related. Um, Now, if you were to write this, I would think, okay, I understand what you're saying. I kind of know what you're talking about. If we know the theme here, which is they're talking about the you here is God in a monotheistic Christian religion, and then this is how God makes the speaker feel. So let's just look at this first sentence. You give me joy that is unspeakable. Now, we can use the thesaurus to transform these words. So you might, when you're trying to describe your relationship to God, if you have one, or at least this author has one, this is the simplest thing that you can say that you've come up with. You give me joy. Joy is a very simple word that communicates a fondness, a happiness, but it's not the same as happiness or fondness. It's its own kind of style of happiness and fondness. And then something that's unspeakable. In this context, we understand that it can't be put into words. You give me this like happiness and fondness that I can't quite put into words. It's unspeakable. Now let's say you're tempted to use a thesaurus to make yourself sound a little bit more professional. So I'll just use a little thesaurus function here, look at synonyms. You give me joy that is disgusting. That's not really what I'm trying to say. You give me joy that is appalling. You give me joy that is revolting, horrifying, terrifying, terrible, horrendous, indescribable. Well, clearly, the unspeakable that we're talking about here doesn't match any of those synonyms. And so even if there was a word that I vaguely recognized as meaning something beneficial or positive, I might choose it. But here we can see that's not going to help us out at all. It's going to go the opposite direction. You give me joy that is disgusting. I'm not even going to substitute that because it is revolting. What about joy? Joy is a three-letter word. Maybe we can do better than that. So you give me pleasure that is unspeakable. So let's just say we do that. You give me pleasure that is unspeakable. Well, now that sounds vaguely sexual. You give me pleasure that is unspeakable. Let's go back to joy, because I'm not really talking about sex here, or at least the author isn't. You give me thrill that is unspeakable. Well, notice that I just substituted one word and it was the synonym that was recommended, but you give me thrill that is unspeakable. Well, that's missing an article. It's now grammatically incorrect. So I was going to say you give me a thrill that is unspeakable. Now, if I didn't understand that it needed an article, even though it's a synonym, I would suddenly go from being able to speak in complete sentences to possibly someone who has English as their second language and doesn't recognize that articles are necessary in some cases. So you give me a thrill that is unspeakable. I can imagine when we're talking about religion that part of it might be thrilling, but again, thrill I would associate more with a roller coaster, danger, something's thrilling where my life could possibly end, so ooh, that's exciting. And that's not the same as the joy that was initially brought up. There's something, I don't want to say naive, that's the wrong word. There's something precious, there's something sincere, almost childlike about joy that is different from thrill. And so I wouldn't want to use that either. Now you might be tempted to say like ecstasy. You give me ecstasy that is unspeakable. Again, ecstasy sort of implies something sexual there. But ecstasy, though you might recognize it as, oh, that's like a $100 word I can use here and make it sound like I'm smarter than I feel at the moment. But you give me ecstasy that is unspeakable. And let's just say for fun, You did the same thing with unspeakable. You give me ecstasy, that is disgusting. Well, all of a sudden, I don't know what the person is trying to say. I don't, and I'm put off by it. I don't really want to know what they're trying to say just because of the words here. You get the idea. So, um, the thesaurus can be helpful, but it's very easily unhelpful if you're not careful. So then, how can you use a thesaurus in a way that's most beneficial? Well, in my opinion, your writing should be done without a thesaurus. And so keep the thesaurus on the shelf or in the Word document or whatever in the program, and only pull it out in this one specific instance. And that instance is when you find yourself using the same word repeatedly. And so if you were writing an essay about joy, you would want to use the word joy because that's what it's about. If you keep substituting joy and then happiness and then elation and then excitement and then thrill, in psychology and in any social science and probably any natural science, the reader's going to wonder if you're changing the concept. Wait, you were defining joy, now you're defining elation. What's the paper about? Like, what's your focus here? And so it's helpful when you're talking about specific concepts to keep that concept and repeat it, because when you define it the first time, you don't need to keep defining it. So it doesn't help when you shift it from joy to elation. Now, like as a psychologist, I'm going to be reading it and be like, oh, well, how's elation different from joy? If you're using two different words, you must have two different concepts in mind. And so you want to keep those concepts the same. But if you were telling a story and you were giving an example and you just used joy because it was the best adjective you could think of, or I guess the best noun that you could think of, and so you say, at my birthday party, I was full of joy. And the joy that my friends brought me was unparalleled. And the amount of enjoyment I got from my cake, like, you see how like I keep repeating joy. I'm not referring to a specific psychological construct. And it's like I don't have any other words in my vocabulary. So in that case, when you're repeating the same word over and over again, and as a reader, it's like joy, joy, joy. Come on, like please mix it up a little bit. That's when you want to use a thesaurus. But when you use a thesaurus, don't pick a word that is vaguely familiar. So it's like, oh yeah, elation, ecstasy. Yeah, I've heard that word before. It means happy, more or less. Once you make a decision and you're not 100% sure of it, then when your reader reads it, they're not going to be 100% sure about the word that you've chosen, and they will not be 100% sure about your ability to use your vocabulary. So only pick words from a thesaurus that you are 100% sure of. And if you're not sure, look up a bunch of examples of being used and make sure the context is appropriate for how you're using it. All right, so that's just a little bit of fun with how to use and how not to use a thesaurus.